$8,200. Gone. In 90 days. And the whole time it was happening, I was using AI tools every single day, feeling incredibly productive, patting myself on the back for being such a forward-thinking, tech-savvy operator. I had subscriptions. I had automations. I had a Notion dashboard that looked like the cockpit of a fighter jet. And I was hemorrhaging money so fast, I didn't even notice until my accountant sent me a message that I can only describe as concerned but professional. So here's what this video is about. It's not about AI being bad. It's not about me being uniquely stupid, although that is on the table. It's about a specific trap that McKinsey just confirmed in a major report, that AI productivity gains are real, but they're conditional. And the condition most solo builders skip entirely is redesigning your workflows before you plug AI into them. I didn't redesign anything. I just added AI to a broken system and made the broken system faster. Faster at losing money, as it turns out. We're going to walk through the whole story, the peak, the collapse, the exact invoice trail, and the one workflow redesign that stopped the bleeding. And I'll give you the numbers, because vague lessons are useless, and I've already paid the tuition on this one, so you don't have to. Let's start at the peak, because every good disaster story starts with someone feeling invincible. It was early 2026, and I had just had my best quarter ever as a solo operator. I was running a content and consulting business, doing client deliverables, writing, strategy decks, the whole thing. And I had just stacked what felt like a dream tool setup. Claude for long-form writing, an AI meeting summarizer, an automated client reporting pipeline, and a prompt library I'd spent 2 weeks building. I genuinely thought I had cracked the code. Revenue was up. Delivery felt faster. I was taking on more clients because I figured, hey, AI handles the heavy lifting now, right? I onboarded 3 new retainer clients in January alone, each one paying between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. On paper, I had just scaled without hiring anyone. I was the efficiency poster child. I should have been on a podcast. I was not, in fact, on a podcast. I was about to learn something extremely expensive. Now here's where the origin story matters, because you need to understand what I was doing before AI to appreciate how badly I misapplied it. Before I touched any AI tools, my workflow was slow, but it was honest. I'd spend about 4 hours on a client strategy deck. I'd spend 2 hours on a monthly report. I'd spend 90 minutes on a content brief. These were real-time costs, but they were costs I had priced into my retainers. My clients were paying for that time, and they were getting a consistent, quality output that matched what they expected. The workflow wasn't glamorous, but it worked. I knew exactly where my time went. I knew exactly what each client was getting, and I knew exactly how much capacity I had. This is the part I want you to hold on to, because it becomes important later. I had a functioning system. Slow, yes. Inefficient in places, absolutely. But it was a system with clear inputs and clear outputs. And then I decided to make it faster without changing any of the underlying logic. Sarcastic. And this is where I did what every excited early adopter does. I went full send. I didn't audit my workflow first. I didn't ask which parts of this process actually need to be faster. I just started plugging AI into every step I could find, like I was installing a turbocharger on a car that already had alignment issues. The car goes faster, sure. It also veers into a ditch faster, which is a metaphor, but also kind of literally what happened. Here's the rise, and it felt real. In January and February, things genuinely seemed better. I was producing first drafts of strategy decks in 45 minutes instead of 4 hours. I was generating client reports in 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. I felt like I had unlocked a superpower, and I made a decision that felt rational at the time, but was actually the turning point. I used those time savings to take on more work instead of improving the quality of existing work. This is the exact trap McKinsey's recent report flagged, and it's the same thing a 2025 METR study found when they tracked 16 experienced developers using AI tools on real tasks. Those developers finished 19% slower than without AI, but they were confident they'd gone 20% faster. The feeling of speed and the reality of output were completely disconnected. I was living that study in real time, except instead of code review cycles, I was measuring it in client invoices. So let's talk about the actual turning point, because this is the moment the seed of disaster was planted, and I had absolutely no idea. It was mid-February, and I delivered a strategy deck to a client. Let's call her Priya, a SaaS founder I'd been working with for 6 months. Priya was sharp. She noticed immediately that the deck felt different. The structure was there, the data was there, but the specific insight she was paying for, The thing that came from me actually sitting with her problem for 4 hours, that was missing. She didn't cancel. She just asked for a revision. And I did the revision, which took another 2 hours on top of the 45 minutes I'd already spent. So now I was at 2 hours and 45 minutes for a deliverable I'd priced at 4 hours of work. Still profitable, technically. But here's what I didn't clock. That revision created a pattern. Because I was taking on more clients with the same bandwidth, every revision request now had a compounding cost I hadn't built into my model. And now we hit the decline. And this is where the pacing picks up because that's how collapses actually work, slowly at first, then all at once. March arrived and 3 things happened in the same 2-week window. Client 1 asked for a full redo of a content brief because the AI-generated version had used a competitor's positioning language almost verbatim. I hadn't caught it in my review because I was reviewing too fast. Client 2 flagged that their monthly report had wrong metrics because my automated pipeline had pulled from the wrong data source, and I hadn't verified the output. And Client 3, this is the one that really stung. Client 3 sent a polite but very clear email saying they were pausing the retainer because the strategic depth they'd signed up for wasn't showing up in the deliverables anymore. That was a $2,000 a month retainer, gone. And I remember reading that email and genuinely not understanding what had happened, because from where I was sitting, I was using better tools and working harder than ever. That's the cruelest part of this trap. The effort feels real even when the output is degrading. Serious, here's the invoice trail, because I promised you real numbers. The $2,000 retainer cancellation was the most visible loss, but it wasn't the biggest one. The real damage was in revision hours. I tracked every hour I spent on rework in March, and it came to 31 hours of unbilled revision time. At my effective hourly rate of around $120, that's $3,700 of value I delivered for free because my AI-accelerated first drafts weren't landing at the quality clients expected. Then there were the tool subscriptions I'd stacked up and wasn't fully using, 4 AI tools at an average of $80 a month each, plus an automation platform at $200 a month. That's $520 a month, or $1,560 over the quarter. Add the lost retainer revenue for the remaining 2 months of the contract, $4,000. Add the unbilled revision hours, $3,700. And you get to $8,260, which I rounded down because I'm not a monster. And look, actually, let me be fair here for a second. Some of that loss was on me independently of AI. I took on too many clients. I reviewed outputs too quickly. I made assumptions. But here's the thing. Without AI giving me the false confidence that I could handle more volume, I wouldn't have made those decisions. The AI didn't cause the problem directly. It enabled me to scale a broken workflow to a scale where the breakage became financially catastrophic. That's the distinction that matters. This is exactly what that MIT report from 2025 found when they looked at enterprise AI adoption, a 95% failure rate for generative AI projects to show measurable financial returns within 6 months. 95%. And the reason wasn't that the AI was bad. The reason was that companies were bolting AI onto existing workflows instead of redesigning the workflows around AI's actual strengths and limitations. The top 20% of companies capturing most of AI's economic value were twice as likely to redesign workflows first. I was firmly in the 80%. So here's the collapse moment, the bottom of the J-curve, if you want to use the economist's term for it. It was the first week of April. I had 1 fewer retainer client, a stack of revision requests, and a growing suspicion that I had fundamentally misunderstood what AI was supposed to do for my business. I had treated it as a speed tool when it needed to be a quality amplifier. Those are 2 completely different jobs, and they require 2 completely different workflow designs. Curious, and here's the question I finally asked myself, which is the question I want you to ask yourself right now if any of this sounds familiar. What does my client actually pay for? Not what do I deliver? What do they pay for? Because those 2 things can be very different. Priya wasn't paying for a strategy deck. She was paying for the specific insight that comes from someone who has spent real time understanding her problem. The deck was just the container. The insight was the product. So here's the redesign, and I want to be specific because vague advice is how we got into this mess. I stopped using AI to replace the thinking phase of my workflow and started using it exclusively in the production phase. The thinking phase, understanding the client's actual problem, identifying the non-obvious angle, deciding what the deliverable should argue, that stays human. That's where the value is. The production phase, drafting, formatting, pulling data, structuring the argument I've already decided on. That's where AI earns its keep. Practically, this meant I added one step I'd been skipping, a 15-minute brief before the brief. Before I touched any AI tool, I'd write 200 words by hand answering 3 questions. What is the client's actual problem? What's the non-obvious insight they need to hear? And what should they feel after reading this? That's it. 15 minutes. And then I'd use that as the prompt context for everything AI produced afterward. The AI output quality jumped immediately. Not because the AI got better, because I gave it something real to work with. I also cut my tool stack from 4 AI subscriptions down to 2, which saved me $240 a month and, more importantly, reduced the cognitive overhead of context switching between platforms. The DX Impact report from early 2026 tracked over 400 companies and found that as AI usage rose by 65%, actual pull request throughput only went up by about 8%. More tools does not mean more output. It often means more coordination cost. Less stack, better results. Excited? And here's what actually happened after the redesign, because I'm not going to leave you at the bottom of the J-curve. Within 6 weeks of implementing the brief before the brief and cutting the stack, revision requests dropped by about 70%. I repitched Priya with a revised scope that explicitly named the thinking phase as a billable component of my retainer, and she signed back on. By the end of May, I had recovered roughly $5,000 of the $8,200 in lost revenue, and my effective hourly rate had gone up because I was doing fewer revisions per deliverable. So what's the actual lesson here, and how do you apply it before it costs you $8,000 to learn it? The McKinsey report that came out last month puts it cleanly. AI's productivity payoff is real but conditional, and the condition is workflow redesign. Not tool selection, not prompt engineering. Workflow redesign. The question isn't which AI tool should I use. The question is which part of my workflow creates value that only I can create, and which part is just production work that AI can handle. Those are different questions, and most people never ask the second one. Here's the one thing I want you to do today, not this week, today. Open whatever your main client deliverable is, whether that's a report, a design, a piece of code, a strategy doc, whatever, and write down the single sentence that describes what your client is actually paying for underneath the deliverable, not the format, the value. If you can't write that sentence in under 2 minutes, that's your bottleneck, and no AI tool on earth is going to fix it for you. But once you can write it, every AI tool you already have becomes about 3 times more useful overnight. And look, I want to be honest with you about something. The redesign I described works for service businesses and solo operators. I've seen it work for most people in this situation, not everyone, but most. If you're building a pure software product or running a team, the specifics are different, though the principle holds. The point isn't to copy my exact 15-minute brief. The point is to stop treating AI as a replacement for the part of your work that clients actually value, and start treating it as a multiplier for the part that's just production. That distinction is worth, well, apparently about $8,000. The next video is going to cover the exact prompt structure I use for the brief before the brief, including the 3 questions and how I format the context block that goes into Claude or GPT afterward. If you've been using AI for client work and you're not seeing the output quality you expected, that's probably the missing piece. And it's free, which is a nice change from the $8,000 lesson.